What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh House. Today, I got a really spicy deck profile for you guys. Despia branded. Didn't really get touched on the ban list, so this deck is technically still at full power. And it's definitely one of the cheaper decks in the format, with the exclusion of maybe Guardian Chimera. But other than that, this deck is relatively cheap and can be picked up and played at locals, and even with some really serious tech cards, can be taken to a regional level. This deck has proven itself at the regional level. Not only that, the lore is awesome, the monsters are awesome. You fusion summon, what more can you ask for? Let's go ahead and get into this deck profile. Guys, we're gonna go ahead and start off with one of the coolest monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Fallen of ALBAZ. This is a easy 3 of in the deck. 3 really helps you grind. It helps you break boards going second, and seeing it in your hand going first just assures your plays to go through playing through things like Ash that really hurt the Despia branded strategy. And with a format that isn't playing Ash as much because of how non-impactful it is, Despia branded definitely gets to shine. I started playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Around the drop of Dawn of Majesty, and since Dawn of Majesty, I've been pretty obsessed with this archetype. Fusion summoning is definitely my favorite mechanic, and waiting around for this mythical support that was coming for branded was a really fun time to experiment with the deck. I have a lot of experience with the deck and have taken down first place at events. With all that being said, none of it would be possible without ALUBER, the Jester of Despia. ALUBER is insane, being able to add anything like branded fusion, branded loss to protect your plays, branded opening to further extend, or branded in red to really pop off. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many good branded spell and traps, especially with the new trap branded separation. You're able to tech this deck out even more. Next, I run 2 Despia in Tragedy. I feel that 2 is really all that's necessary. It definitely helps in the grind game to play 3, and you could consider playing a 3rd. However, seeing 2 of this in your opening hand, which is something you want to consider when you're running a card at 3, is never really optimal. This card is a hard once per turn and only once that turn, so it's really bad to see in multiples. Next, the Ad Libitum of Despia. Easily one of the best monsters in your deck. This helps you recycle Mirror Jade, which isn't a once per turn effect, so you're able to resolve that effect twice in one turn if you have Ad Libitum of Despia in your hand. Not to mention, special summoning a Guardian Chimera on your opponent's turn using Ad Libitum as material allows for some very explosive interruption. Next, I have some of the utility ALBAZ monsters that are searchable through Branded Lost. They all have very relevant effects on their own and are all very powerful in their own right. Springin's Kit is essentially another copy of Branded Fusion. Being able to search the card in any other branded spell or trap and being able to recycle from grave makes Springin's Kit such a vital card in this strategy. At of course, only the cost of having to return a card from hand to deck. Next, Tri-Brigade Mercurier catches a lot of people off guard because it is a hand trap, and this deck doesn't really traditionally run hand traps, but being able to search the card off Branded Loss makes it that much better of a tool card. And of course, Albion the Shrouded Dragon is essentially an upstart goblin for the deck, and is also treated as Fallen of ALBAZ while on the field and in the graveyard, which is very relevant. One of the best fusion spells ever printed. Branded Fusion allows for so much explosiveness. You're able to make Mirror Jade and a plethora of other monsters. Not only that, this card is so generic that a lot of light and dark monsters are easily abusable in this strategy because of how easy it is to dump them to grave with Branded Fusion. And with new branded support dropping in almost every set, the tech cards just keep growing. Branded Opening was such a needed reprint in the mega packs, and it's great to see this card as a Prismatic Secret Rare. Definitely deserving of the Prismatic Secret Rare slot. This card does so much for the Despia strategy, and it's honestly the card that deserves to see some sort of checking on the ban list. Branded Opening allows for you to fetch ALUBER from the deck while also sending Despia in Tragedy as an effect, meaning that you procced both of those cards, and both being able to search. Branded Opening is an insane consistency card, and it has a very relevant effect to protect your fusion monsters when they're being destroyed. And you can easily send this card to graveyard off of Albion the Shrouded Dragon to draw a card. Branded in red is easily one of the best cards in this strategy. Being able to summon things like Guardian Chimera on your opponent's turn because this card is a quick play spell allows for so much interruption. This also procs a lot of the effects of your Despia monsters without having to worry about things like Call by the Grave because they're in the banish zone while they're activating. Not to mention, this card really helps you OTK. And for our last branded spell, Branded Lost. Branded Lost works a lot like Magical Meltdown in the fact that it gives your fusion summon protection. Not only that, Branded Lost adds so much consistency to the deck, adding things like Springin's Kit, being able to search for Branded Fusion, or Mercurier to negate an effect, or even Albion to draw a card, Branded Lost is always live. I've been wanting to bump Branded Banishment up to 2. This card is absolutely killer against Tearlaments, and it's what's gonna win you a lot of those matches against the newer decks in the format, like Sprite and like Tearlaments. Being able to banish on your opponent's field, completely wiping their board for a Garura, a Mud Dragon of the Swamp, or even a Dracostapelia is super powerful. Now, it wouldn't be a Branded deck without some absolutely crazy spice. Light and dark monsters are easily able to hit the graveyard in this deck, and with Branded Fusion, being able to summon out Albion with Ra's Disciple and Fallen of Albaz, then searching for Branded Expulsion on the end of your turn, tributing one of your fusion monsters to put Ra's Disciple on your opponent's field, your opponent's pretty much gonna have to scoop. There's really not a lot your opponent can do. Ra's Disciple is super oppressive and a lot more oppressive than Scythe is, especially this format. I recommend you guys trying a lot of different light monsters in this build. Monsters like Artifact Scythe and Ra's Disciple are great examples for replacements now that Snow is banned. I still play the supplementary engine of Fright for Patchwork. Egypt Chain, being a dark monster, easily helps you push for game in scenarios where you're able to fuse or even start your combos when you're short on monsters. Searchable through Egypt Chain is Fright for Patchwork. Fright for Patchwork adds you Egypt Chain and Polymerization, and Polymerization is so important in this deck. Being able to fuse on your opening turn is what makes or breaks this deck. Next, 2 Polymerization. I run 2 Egypt Chain, 2 Fright for Patchwork, and 2 Polymerization. I think it's the proper ratio, not having to worry about clogging your hand with too much of the engine, and being able to see Polymerization as often as you see the other pieces is important. Polymerization is honestly what gets your combos rolling if you can't get to Branded Fusion. Now moving on to some power spells, Tearlaments plays Eradicator Epidemic Virus. They're dumping the card off Curious and setting it back with Nightmare Griffin. So if this play becomes a lot more common, then it is important to note to switch some of these spells out for hand traps, so you're truly able to disrupt that combo on turn 0. Back to the cards, Foolish Burial is a huge utility piece in this deck. It's a 1-card Branded Fusion, and of course, Call by the Grave needs to be included, in my opinion, in just about every deck. If this deck is gonna do anything, it's gonna break a board. Dark Ruler No More is the perfect way to start your turn, knocking off your opponent's effects and just plowing through their field. I do think that Forbidden Droplet is still mandatory in this deck. Still being able to respond to monster effects in the draw and standby phase is what really separates this card from Dark Ruler No More, and why I still think it's too important not to run. And of course, to round off a 41 card deck, the best board breaking card in Yu-Gi-Oh, especially in this deck, Super Polymerization. This card helps you extend so much, helps you OTK, and helps break boards. Super Poly is so at home in a fusion deck. Now getting into the extra deck, we'll start off with our ALBAZ fusions. Albalainatus the Abyss Dragon has a great effect when it's sent, and is also fairly easy to summon, especially if you're going against decks that run a lot of dragon monsters. Next, one of the most important fusion monsters you have in your extra deck, Albion the Branded Dragon. I run 2 because I want to be able to make one and send one off Mirror Jade. Albion is also what sets up the Ra's Disciple lock, and it can set those insane spell and trap cards like Branded in Red and Branded Banishment. Another fusion monster that extends, YUGIOH. Easily one of the best fusion monsters that they've printed for this deck. Dark monsters are the majority of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so this card always feels live. I like running 2 because I make one with my own deck, and I usually am able to fuse off one of my opponent's monsters to make this card. Mirror Jade the Ice Blade Dragon, an awesome boss monster, and such a dangerous card, especially in today's meta. Being able to banish Tearlament monsters, or even cards like Gigantic Sprite, in the middle of a combo could seriously kill a deck. And with the OTK potential this deck has, finishing off your opponent is no problem. Everyone knows this card as the Tax Dragon. Your opponent is going to have to pay 1200 life points as cost for everything they activate if you're able to get both of these on the field, which is something this deck does insanely easy. This outright kills Floanderies and a lot of rogue decks that need a lot of setup for their decks. I still run the 1 Queritus. It's awesome in Eruption and has a great on-field effect to cut everyone's attack who isn't a fusion monster of level 8 or higher. But this card is really powerful because it puts your opponent in a really tight spot, risking summoning the Fallen of ALBAZ from your deck is something your opponent really can't afford. This card forever changed how this deck is played. Being able to really explode on your opponent's turn because you're able to make this card with branded in red, popping 2 cards on your opponent's field and drawing 1 is amazing. What's really important to note is Guardian Chimera has a plethora of ruling dilemmas, so it's important to really read this card, especially if you're going against this deck. It would really hurt to throw an entire match just because you didn't read this card. Some of the genuine Super Poly targets that I run are Muddragon of the Swamp and of course Garura, both being insanely generic Super Poly targets, Garura being a little bit better because when it leaves the field you're able to draw a card, and of course adding consistency to your deck is always welcome. Muddragon in the Swamp help protects your monsters, but it's mostly just a generic Super Poly target. Of course, Despia and Starving Venom Fusion Dragon are both Super Poly targets, but in my opinion they're a little bit more useful as utility fusions. What I mean by that is Despia is awesome to fuse your Ad Libitum of Despia and your Mirror Jade. Once you've already used Mirror Jade's effect, you're able to bring the Mirror Jade back with Ad Libitum, use its effect again while having Despia on the field. It is an insane combo. And of course, Starving Venom Fusion Dragon helps you out a lot of those Towers X cards, especially that infamous Link 6 that Ignister runs. Now diving into the side deck, we got the Tearlament Killer, Diddy Crow. You got to run this card. You have to run this card. Tearlaments is easily the best deck in the format, and if you're not prepared for the deck, it's going to run you over. And of course, a little bit more support on the Tearlament hate, Ghostbell and Haunted Mansion. Yes, this card is a 1 effect, so it will be a little harder to stop those plays, but on the bright side, Ghostbell and Haunted Mansion stops things like Call by the Grave and Diddy Crow itself, which hit this deck pretty heavy. If you guys didn't know, Mystic Mine didn't get hit. So of course, you have to run back row removal. If you don't, you're gonna lose a lot of games to a lot of people trying to stall you out with Mystic Mine. Lightning Storm and Harpie's Feather Duster absolutely blows out a lot of those back row heavy decks. Much like Dark Ruler No More and Forbidden Droplet, Twin Twisters is a quick play spell, so it does have a leg up on things like Harpie's Feather Duster or Lightning Storm because you're able to activate the cards in draw and standby phase. And of course, the perfect mix between Tearlament hate and back row hate, evenly matched. It is an insane card. This absolutely will steal you so many games. Being able to buckle down going second, throwing this card in, you know you're able to break any board between this card, Super Poly, Forbidden Droplet, Dark Ruler No More, normal Summon Fallen of ALBAZ. This deck is going to break boards. It's insane. Guys, thank you for tuning back into Yu-Gi-Oh! House. Your support is much appreciated, and please comment down below. Tell me what you guys are running as your light monster. Did you guys opt to run Ra's Disciple or Artifact Scythe? The dropping of the ban list is bringing a lot of decks to the forefront, and it feels like everyone is fighting for that top 10 spot. Alright guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for checking back in, and of course, peace!